The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, thinking they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Once upon a time, we didn't have opening night in the NFL. We just had the first Sunday. Games would be played on Sunday. Along came Monday Night Football in 1970, and then in the 80s, we got Thursday Night Football. Now I got football all the time. And tonight is opening night. There's another game tomorrow night. There's a full slate, of course, on Sunday. There's football on Monday. There's football every Thursday. What the hell? They're playing a couple of games on Wednesday this year, Christmas Day. Netflix, more money. The more product, the better for the NFL. And they are not at all worried about overexposure. But Lord Football does make its return tonight. And I'm sure if you're like me, you're excited about that, right? This is a great time of the year. And if you've spent some summer Sundays going, yeah, I guess I'll watch the Nats for a while, to now you look at the slate and you find out what time your team is playing, whether it's the Commanders or anybody else, and how you're going to work in the Red Zone channel and what games you're going to watch outside of that. It is a whole new world for football, and we're off and rolling tonight with the Baltimore Ravens playing their opener at Kansas City, a rematch of the AFC Championship game. And we will be your home for Ravens football here on ESPN 630 throughout the season. So our coverage is going to start at 7:30. They're supposed to kick off at 8:20, but I don't know, probably going to be a little bit later because there's probably some type of ceremony for the Chiefs for winning the Super Bowl last year. We're going to get to teams that are tried to three-peat, and now the Chiefs are making their attempt to three-peat. We'll get to that. Plus, Dan Orlovsky has really good analysis of what to look for rookie quarterbacks. We'll get to that later this hour, and comments from Jaden Daniels, who is going to make his NFL debut on Sunday at Tampa. And he does seem to be a cool customer, but there is a learning curve, which he understands for rookie quarterbacks, and I thought his comments were quite telling from what he said yesterday. And Travis Kelce getting ready to launch what he says may or may not be his last season in the NFL. He and his brother are printing money with the podcast. He's an international star now that he's dating Taylor Swift. It's really remarkable for a guy who played at the University of Cincinnati and I think was he a third-round pick of the Chiefs? I believe so. So we'll get to that in a bit. But when we talk about comebacks in sports, I don't think anything will ever top this. What we saw Alex Smith do on a leg that doctors were considering amputating, and if you've seen it now, what it looks like, I mean, that was remarkable, what he was able to do for Washington, the Washington football team. He left as a Redskin on a stretcher and then came back 2 seasons later and started a bunch of games for the Commanders as they actually made the playoffs. No, they weren't the Commanders yet. Excuse me. They were the Washington football team. And they did make it to the playoffs, though he didn't get to play in the playoff game. They gave it to Taylor Heineke, who became sort of a legend in losing that game. You know, he lost to Tom Brady in the Bucs, but he kept it close. But, boy, the comeback that he pulled off was remarkable. But nothing will ever top what Damar Hamlin is going to do, or that actually he has done, but will take the next step in doing on Sunday when the Buffalo Bills host the Arizona Cardinals. And you remember that it was just 20 months ago, so a little more than a year and a half ago, that, he died. Excuse me, he died on the field. Okay? He was dead. And fortunately, they had the people in place and the equipment in place to resuscitate him. He was taken to a hospital in Cincinnati. He was in a medically induced coma for 2 days. They didn't know whether he was going to live or die. 2 days in a coma. Doctors diagnosed that the cause of his heart stopping on the field was what they call commotio cordis, commotio cordis, which happens when a direct blow at a specific point in the heartbeat causes cardiac arrest. Cleared for practice and assured by specialists that chances of a recurrence were slim, he was gradually eased back into the game. He appeared in 5 games as a backup last year. Now he has regained his starting spot with the Buffalo Bills, and he'll be with Taylor Rapp in the secondary when they take on the Arizona Cardinals on Sunday. There cannot be anything else like this ever again. Hopefully this doesn't happen again. Will there be another player who literally dies on the field and comes back? Well, I hope no player dies on the field, but if it happens again, okay, we can say somebody else did it. But this is really remarkable. And when I saw last year that he had played in 5 games, I kind of thought like, okay, he had proved that he could come back, and that was going to be it. But he's taken the next step in his recovery and has won the starting job because, Buffalo had signed a player in free agency, Mike Edwards, fifth-year player, was a second, and they used the second-rounder to take Cole Bishop. So they had players competing for that spot, but Hamlin won it and will be in the starting lineup when the Buffalo Bills play on Sunday. Absolutely remarkable. All right, three-peat. And there have been teams that have had an opportunity to do what the Kansas City Chiefs have done. Nobody has been able to do it in NFL history. No team except for, and if you want to, go back pre-Super Bowl, which I tend to do. A lot of people don't want to do this, but the Green Bay Packers did win 3 consecutive championships in the 1960s. But in the Super Bowl era, there has never been a team to three-peat. The Miami Dolphins got to 3 straight Super Bowls. They got clobbered by Dallas in the first one, then beat Washington, and then beat Minnesota. But no team has ever won 3 straight, and the Kansas City Chiefs are attempting to do that this year. Here's the thing about the Chiefs. A lot of these teams, they, as time has gone on, they age. Players leave in free agency because you tend to get more attention when you play on a winning team, on a Super Bowl team. There's more desire for you in free agency. Last night, Booger McFarland was on the ESPN Pardon the Interruption show, and he was asked about these Chiefs, and he says, hold on, this team could be better than the last 2.
I mean, football-wise, it's got to be a stronger position, right? If you look at receiver, they get Hollywood Brown. They add Xavier Worthy in the draft from Texas, who ran the 4.2, so they're going to be faster. They're talking about going back to the playbook that they had with Tyreek Hill. So from a football standpoint, offensively, they should be better. Chris Jones comes back. You got George Karlaftis on the defensive line with him. He's a year older. So everything says football-wise they should be better. But here's the deal, guys. They've won 2 Super Bowls in a row. And human nature starts to set in like, yeah, we've been there and done that. So my question is this: where's their motivation? Are they going to be motivated to come back and win 3 in a row? I know everyone says it. Travis Kelce has said it. Patrick Mahomes has said it. We want to win 3 in a row. But there's something about human nature that takes over and being complacent. Yeah, we've been there and we've done that. Or you take it for granted. And so I just wonder from that standpoint, their mental makeup. And I know Andy Reid may be the best coach in the National Football League right now since Bill Belichick has retired. Can their mental makeup be where it needs to be for them to be 3 in a row? Because football-wise, they have everything they need.
And Booger, let's extend this for a second. If the makeup is where you like seeing it, or it isn't, give us 3 teams that you think could knock off the Chiefs this season.
Well, I'm going to start with the one that they're going to play tomorrow night in the Baltimore Ravens, because I think the motivation is there. You know, Lamar Jackson and Dak Prescott are in that same category of big-time quarterbacks that have come up small in the postseason. Lamar has to get over the hump. He can win all the MVPs he wants until you do it in the postseason and lead Baltimore to a championship. I think people are going to still question him. So I would say the Ravens. And then I go on the other side of the bracket and I look at 2 teams, the Detroit Lions and the San Francisco 49ers, because I think Detroit is set up. Like, they remind me of that old Buccaneer team. They just keep coming and knocking on the door. And I just love their mentality. We all made fun of Dan Campbell when he talked about biting the elbows and knees and all these different things. But it's amazing how tough and how physical that team plays. And then you look at the 49ers, Mike, I'm going to steal a line from Tom Jackson. If not now, when for the 49ers? Like, how many times are you going to get to the NFC title game and get to the Super Bowl and not win it all? So Baltimore, San Francisco, and Detroit are 3 teams that I would take some of Tony's money that still has dust on it from last season because he hadn't spent it, and I would put on those 3 teams.
Ain't that the truth?
That's Booger McFarland last night on PTI. Lions are really a trendy pick, and the 49ers, they're kind of flirting with Buffalo Bills territory. Now, I respect what the Bills did in going to 4 straight Super Bowls, but they didn't win one, and they stand out for that. the 49ers continued to get to NFC Championship games. They either got knocked out because their quarterback was hurt, as they had two quarterbacks actually against Philadelphia, and then losing the two Super Bowls to the Kansas City Chiefs. So they're in that kind of a category right now. For a second on the opinion of Booger McFarland, Dan Orlovsky was on the Dan Patrick Show yesterday, and he also believes that the Chiefs may be a better team this year than last year.
It's odd to think that the team that won the Super Bowl is a better football team this year than they were last year, but I don't think it's even close that they're a better football team this year, as long as Hollywood and Xavier Worthy are healthy players, because just the addition of speed. Now I was saying this yesterday. I mean, Patrick is by far the best player in the NFL, right? Most important player in the NFL. He's got a rookie starting at left tackle. I mean, you can make the case. We often have the conversation, who's under the most pressure in the NFL? That left tackle rookie from BYU, Bob, he's got a lot of pressure on him. So, we got to see what that looks like. But I do think if they play to, the way that the talent kind of aligns it, they'll be a better football team. So the expectation, they're the team to beat.
But I wonder if it's pressure or motivation to try to three-peat. If I said pick one or the other for the Chiefs, is there pressure to three-peat or is it motivation to three-peat?
I think it's an obsession to three-peat. I don't, they are – Patrick has long been different when it comes to the way he viewed his career. I think that's why he took that long contract. The same with Travis, the same with Andy Reid. I think there's this obsession to go do it because no one's done it. I think for Patrick, he realizes that places me firmly into the conversation with Tom Brady, because I've done something that he's never done. Obviously, Tom has the longevity and the 7. So I think there's an obsession within that group, within that organization to go get it done. I don't sense a ton of pressure. I think it's more them wanting to go do something that's never done before.
That's Dan Orlovsky, and the old Nick Saban line about success is the biggest danger to success is success, that you tend to get satisfied. And these Chiefs are saying the right things, but internally, how do they feel? Now, let's take a look at the teams that tried to three-peat. All of them have come up short, starting with the Packers in 1968, though Vince Lombardi, before the term was really invented for Dick Vermeil some years later, Vince Lombardi was burned out. He had coached the Packers for 9 years. They had won 5 championships, including the first 2 Super Bowls, and the pressure was just getting to him, and the amount of work was incredible. He was both the general manager and the coach, so he thought he tried just being the GM, hated that, and then came back and coached the Redskins for a year in 1969 before he tragically died of cancer. But he had turned the team over to his defensive coordinator in 1968 after they had won their second straight Super Bowl over the Raiders. It was Phil Bengtson, and Phil Bengtson was not a head coach. They went 6-7-1 in his first season, and the Packers went on a long drought. They made the playoffs only 3 times over the next 25 years after 1968. Then you have the 74 Dolphins. Now, remember the 74 Dolphins, they followed up the team that went undefeated and beat the Redskins in 1972. That was after they had made the Super Bowl the year before and gotten clobbered by Dallas. Then they came back and won it again the following season, beating Minnesota 24-7 in the Super Bowl. And then they get to the postseason again in 1974 and actually had a chance to move on. But in the playoffs, in the first round, it was not the AFC title game, but in the first round, remember the famous sea of hands catch that Kenny Stabler throwing in the end zone? So the Raiders advanced that year. They ultimately lost to the Steelers. But another thing that really hurt them as they tried to continue off of that team, three of their biggest offensive stars, Larry Zonka, Jim Kick, and Paul Warfield, went to the World Football League, and the Dolphins went through a period of rebuilding under Don Shula. Here's a team that I think really had the best chance to three-peat, and probably would have had they not had offensive injuries. It was a run-based team. Terry Bradshaw was the quarterback, but they lost both Rocky Bleier and Franco Harris to injury, so they really had no offense. Their defense, the 76 Steelers, after winning the back-to-back Super Bowls, they may have had a team that was capable of winning and may have won and probably had the best defense they ever had because they had allowed less than 10 points a game in the regular season. But in the AFC Championship game against Oakland, they lost 24-7, and then the Raiders went on to win the Super Bowl that year. Then you had the Steelers of 1980. Remember, they went back-to-back twice, so this was the second of their repeat teams, and they had beaten the Rams in the Super Bowl, but the following year, they finished 9-7, missed the playoffs for the first time since 1971, and that was the end of the dynasty. The players were getting older, and they were getting ready to move on. Chuck Noll remained the coach, but all those great players that they had in winning those 4 Super Bowls had pretty much aged out. There's another team that I think really had a great shot to win and probably would have were it not for an unfortunate Roger Craig fumble. That's the 49ers of 1990. They had won their second straight Super Bowl. This was after that Bill Walsh had retired, and they still had enough talent to dismantle the Broncos 55-10 in the Super Bowl, but they played the Giants in the NFC Championship game. Not only did Roger Craig fumble, but Joe Montana got hurt late in the game, missed most of the following year. That was the Giants team that beat the Buffalo Bills in that Super Bowl when Scott Norwood kicked it wide right. The 94 Cowboys, okay, I have absolutely no doubt that if Jimmy Johnson were still the coach, they would have three-peated. They might have won 5 in a row. That's how good they were. That's how well they were built with the draft. They were poised to win. But the egos of Jerry and Jimmy got in the way. Jimmy left after winning a second straight Super Bowl. Coach Gunsmoke comes in. Barry Switzer, he was not an NFL coach. Troy Aikman hated him. And in 1994, they did not make it back. They actually made a run at it. They were down 21-0 to San Francisco in the NFC Championship game. Came back, but lost by 10 points, 38-28. Turned the ball over 5 times in that game, and that was really the difference there. But the following year, they did win. They had so much talent that in spite of Switzer, they won a Super Bowl. But their chance to three-peat didn't happen for them in 1994 as the 49ers went on to win the Super Bowl. The 99 Broncos, this is totally explainable. John Elway retired after winning 2 straight. He's the only quarterback to do that. No other quarterback has won back-to-back Super Bowls and said, see you later. But he did that. His knee was in bad shape. He thought it was time to go. They went to Brian Griese as the quarterback. Then they had big injuries, including losing Terrell Davis in the 4th game of the season for the year. And they finished 6-10. Over the previous 3 years, they had lost only 3 games. So that team really was not a factor, I don't think, to win 3 straight. The Patriots, maybe. This was the team that had won in 2003 and 2004. Remember this, that early in the season in 2003, they lost at FedEx Field. It was the Coach Spurrier team. And actually, Spurrier got his team to 3-1 with that win. The Patriots didn't lose again until the following season, till the 2004 season, but they still repeated. They beat the Eagles in the Super Bowl. But the next year, they entered the AFC divisional round against the Broncos, but they just couldn't hold on to the ball again. Turnovers, big. They've turned it over 5 times. Champ Bailey had a 100-yard pick 6. They lost 27-13. The Broncos' first playoff win since they had won Super Bowl 33, and New England finally had to bow out, but they would win more. There would be more days of success with them. So we'll see where the Chiefs fit into this, but a lot of it will be determined by health, of course. But what you're hearing from Booger McFarland and Dan Orlovsky is the offense, which struggled last year. Remember that this was not a great year for Patrick Mahomes and the offense. They got it going in the playoffs, but the defense carried them. So the defense comes back, and they've made some additions on offense, which could make them better. And, like Saban says, the biggest enemy of success is success. So let's see what happens. Let's see how they overcome that fat and happy feeling. Or do they still have the hunger to make history? And I'm certain that Mahomes does, because in the Brady conversation, not only would this be Super Bowl 4 for him, but he would do something that Brady was not able to accomplish, and that's win 3 straight Super Bowls. And it all starts tonight as they take on the Baltimore Ravens. Coverage here on ESPN 630 gets underway at 7:30. Coming up, we've got a new contract for a non-skill position player. This did not happen in the days of Dan Snyder. They did not give extensions to offensive linemen. But Sam Cosmi has one, and we'll get to it next. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
You would have to agree that the Josh Harris group has done a pretty good job of scrubbing away the toxicity of the Dan Snyder era. I mean, they've owned the team for a little more than a year, right? It's been 13 and a half months, and there have been big changes there. And one of the changes that will happen either this season or at the end of the season is that Jason Wright will go. He'll be out as team president. He's in his last year of his contract, and he's going to go. And a lot of things that happened under his watch remain an embarrassment, including the name for many. I don't think the name Commanders has been embraced in any way by the fan base, and the way they rolled it out was very ham-handed and just poorly done. The ways that they would trot out the carcass of Sean Taylor to try to honor him when things were going the wrong way. And I don't know if this was a hire by Jason Wright, but he was definitely promoted during the stewardship of Jason Wright in 2022. His name is Rael Enteen. Enteen. He's identified as the Commanders' Vice President of Content. He'd been with the organization since 2000. That's the same year that Wright came in. I'm not sure whether Wright hired him or he's hired before. He'd worked with the Jets, so he had a background in the NFL. And until yesterday, nobody had heard his name, and that's was probably a good thing in the job that he had. But he had a big title, Vice President of Content. Well, there's a media group called O'Keefe. And this basically was a sting here. I don't know what prompted it, but there was a woman who was posing as, well, she, I guess, set it up so that they were dating, and it was more than one date. And she had recorded him saying some things that I'm certain will get him fired. For the moment, he's been suspended by the team. But in the District of Columbia, it's legal to record a conversation if only one party knows it's being recorded. So in this case, clearly, Enteen didn't know he was being recorded, but the woman who did it did know, but that's okay in the District of Columbia. And among the things that he said, he described NFL fans as high school-educated alcoholics, said about the players, a big chunk is very low-income African Americans that come from a community that is inherently very homophobic. He also described NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell as a $50 million puppet. I would describe him the same way, but I'm not a vice president of the team. I don't work for the NFL. He, at the moment, does, although he's suspended and certainly will be fired. But this is just another example of some of the people that have remained in the organization. And, they haven't had time to clean out everything. But this is, I don't know how pervasive this is among other people there. But, if there are other people who feel this way, either they keep it to themselves, or if they actually want to express these things, they probably need to go as well. And, he said, among other things, and this is maybe insightful, maybe it's not true, who knows, but he indicated that, remember when the pipe burst in the club section a couple of years ago, and the team said, oh, no, that's rainwater. Well, he indicated they knew it was sewage, and they were lying to the fans on purpose. So, again, this is something that I'm sure will come under the watch of the new president, and there have been reports that they're close to hiring one, and maybe this is going to be the tipping point. Maybe this is the point where they bring in the new president and they say, hey, Jason, you can sit in your office and do whatever you do, but this guy's now in charge. He's your boss. If you'd like to leave now, you can. That kind of thing. And they have to have somebody in that spot, and whatever Jason Wright does, I think his duties have been diminished, because ever since the new ownership took over, you never hear from him anymore. But, these are the kind of things that have festered within this organization for a long, long time, and the cleanup takes longer than you might think. You can't completely clean house in one day. And I know it's been a year, but they had so much to do when they took over in July of 2023, And, many of the things that they put in place, they were very careful in how they looked at it, how they analyzed it, and how they came to the conclusion to make the moves that they made. So I really can't get angry at them for this guy still existing in the organization. But at some point soon, he's going to be out. The team released a statement saying the language used in the video runs counter to our values at the Commanders organization. We have suspended the employee pending an internal investigation and will reserve further comment at this time. And, of course, Entine did not respond for comment. Meantime, they're doing things that they have not done before and should have done. Brandon Sheriff is one of the best guards in the NFL. They should have worked out a contract extension for him. Instead, they used the franchise tag on him, and he was allowed to walk to the Jacksonville Jaguars where he got his money. They're not futzing around with this stuff anymore. Sam Cosmi, who's going into his 4th year with the team, he's been here for 3 years, so he was in for 2 years of Dan Snyder ownership and now 1 year of Josh Harris ownership, though there were a lot of things that they had to address last year, including the facilities. And so, the organization was going through a kind of a slow transition. Things have ramped up in the offseason, and I think this was a two-way thing, although it's an awful lot of money, $74 million with $45 million guaranteed, and that makes him the 5th highest paid guard in the NFL. But this was something that they did not do. They did not extend linemen. Clinton Portis got an extension. You never give a running back a contract extension. That just isn't the way things are done in the NFL these days. Yes, Terry McLaurin getting an extension. Should have gotten an extension. Understood. But they've ignored the linemen, and here's a guy who's emerging as one of the top guards in the NFL. And as Dan Quinn said yesterday, this was a move that we knew we had to make.
For Adam and his staff to get that done prior to the season, that's a big deal. And this guy's a commander, through and through. He's tough, he plays square, he's strong, and we're really, are fortunate that he'll be an anchor inside, for years to come. It's a big deal.
Now, remember, he was drafted as a tackle, and credit the Ron Rivera regime for moving him to guard. And they did the same thing with Sheriff, although that was under the Jay Gruden watch. But sometimes you take a guy, and a lot of people thought, well, the Sheriff thing is a disaster. You took him in the first round as a tackle, moved him to guard. But if you got a guy who's going to be one of the premier guards in the league, you're going to do that. And so this is Cosmi. And remember, we say that success is the biggest enemy of success. He's not looking at this as something that, he's achieved what he wanted to achieve. He says this basically is going to motivate him more.
From last year, as each game progressed, I felt like I was more and more fitting that role. I had a mentality of being one of the best guards in the league every time I stepped on the field. Practice, walk through and on the game, during the game. So that mentality will not change. That mentality will be even more motivation to be one of the best guards in this league. And so I think, and I'm grateful that they were able to see that, watch the tape, see that, and just see how, training camp, all this stuff went, to see what type of player I was and am.
And he will start to get the awards that go along with it. He was not All-Pro last year, but he says there's a reason for that, and he's here to help put him in the direction of getting those awards.
If the team's successful, then you'll have the success. I think last year was a prime example. I think I played at an All-Pro level last year, being the first time I was playing guard and stuff like that, and all-pro, and Pro Bowl level. But we all know there's a little bit of politics that goes into that, and how, depending on how good your team is. Like, you look at San Fran, Philly, the Chiefs and stuff like that. How many Pro Bowls, alternates, All-Pros do those guys have? A ton. And that's because the team's success. So if the team is successful, everybody else, would be successful.
Yeah, kind of a no-brainer there. And also, he's looking at the idea of, being part of the new era, the change, and to be one of the cornerstones of that. Very important to Sam Cosmi.
I'm excited to be a part of it. It's so different from the past 3 years that I've been here, and so to feel that, the atmosphere is just different, and you can just see that. I think everybody sees it, and so we need to put it together this season, and I think we will. and I think we got the guys to do it. So I'm excited for the season.
And if not this season, they're going in the right direction. And, of course, a lot of it rides on the quarterback. Well, this is part of the picture for rookie quarterbacks is that you got to protect them. And, there's the feeling that the reason that C.J. Stroud did so well in Houston was they had a good offensive line around him. And I think if you look at any young quarterback and how he develops, he's got to have some security behind the line of scrimmage. So you not only have a guy who is going to come back anyway, but a guy who's here for long-term stability and, it helps his leadership position, a lot of things that go along with this. So it made a lot of sense. A lot of money, $45 million guaranteed for a guard, $74 million, but that's the cost of doing business at this time. And it's also the way that business is being done these days. And this is more from Dan Quinn on not just the ownership getting this done at the time they got it done, but what they have done in this period of time. Remember last year, the team got terrible grades from the players about the facilities, like an F. And you heard Josh Harris say, yeah, we took that seriously. We understand it. We're not making excuses, but we didn't have time to turn it over because we didn't get control of the team until July. This year they had the time. They've done the things to make it right. And Dan Quinn, who's part of the new wave here, recognizes what the ownership had to do to get things to at least this point.
With Josh and being with him during the spring, we had talked about some things that needed, changing. And so I think Adam tells a story. He saw the snow melt and there was an, AstroTurf field. He said, "What the hell's that?" And so he was like, that's AstroTurf, bro. And my point is, Josh recognized some things had to change in betterment for the players. And so for them having their own space as a player lounge, meeting rooms that were, more conducive for the learning that they needed, those were the things. And so to have those areas better for the players, that was a big deal. And Josh was right at the front of that. Knowing that changes had to be made, but it's still him. That's a big commitment, and he was all in for it. He said, "Yep, this needs to change." I remember just being out on the field with him, and knowing that he felt that way too. It was a great feeling for Adam and I to know that we had his trust to say, "Man, let's make this better for the guys. They deserve it."
And I would think that Josh Harris's experience owning other teams helped them here too. Owning the Philadelphia 76ers and the New Jersey Devils. Facilities mean something. The players, they make a lot of money wherever they go. But if you got good locker room facilities, good meeting room facilities, that makes a difference to them. It really does. And the money, Sam Cosmi's life, is it remarkably different today than it was yesterday? Now he's got $45 million guaranteed? No, probably not. But when he goes to work, if he's got the right facility to work in, it's going to make a difference. So we'll see, how it all plays out. It all rides on 5 this year, certainly, and the new coaching staff and the new front office structure. But finally, this is being run like a professional organization. All right, much more on the Commanders as they get ready for the opener. And it was 35 years ago today that a controversy was created on morning television when there was a woman who sat down next to Jane Pauley, and things were never the same. We'll get to that and more as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. One of the things we're going to do tomorrow on a big football Friday, as we will be recapping the Ravens and the Kansas City Chiefs game and previewing the opener for the Commanders, is we will look at opening games over the years. I've got a list of the 3 worst and the 4 best. I couldn't narrow the 4 best down to 3. But I was pretty easily able to come up with the 3 worst. The best is not necessarily what you might think. I think your mind automatically goes to the RG3 debut, which, believe me, was spectacular when they went to New Orleans as 6.5-point underdogs and shocked the world with this new offense that they were running that they'd kept under wraps in the preseason, and a star was born with Robert Griffin III. In fact, I remember Tony Kornheiser calling it the era of unbridled optimism, which unfortunately didn't last very long. But we're about to launch a new one with Jaden Daniels making his debut. And, I've done a lot of comparisons of the two training camps for the two, and I don't think that you can say, oh, all the problems that ultimately resulted with RG3 will never happen with Jaden Daniels. There could be other problems, but I don't think the ridiculous narcissism will rear its head. There doesn't seem to be any indication of that from Jaden Daniels, and understanding that there are going to be some issues there, that it's not always about him. And Griffin, we tended to ignore some signals there because it'd been so long since they had a quarterback, and the year before was, God, it was disgraceful. They had John Beck and Rex Grossman. Yeah, Rex Grossman had gone to a Super Bowl with the Chicago Bears, but he was an interception machine. And John Beck, he was hyped, but he was terrible. He played 3 games, started 3 games for them, got worse in every one of them. Really. I mean, and by the third one, oh, my God, he was just dumping it off. He played a game against the Buffalo Bills, and he was sacked 10 times. This is a game where the Bills were trying to draw some interest to get people to pony up some money for a new stadium, which they're ultimately going to get. But back at that time, 2011, they were playing a game in Toronto. Like, hey, we could move to Toronto if things don't go well here. They went well for the Bills that day. They went terrible for Washington. John Beck was god-awful. So we looked at RG3 as a guy, oh, my God, he's everything they're not. And he was great with the media, and he was, very chatty and all that. And, yeah, I mean, ultimately it blew up. I don't think that's going to happen with Daniels, but he's still got to show that he can play. And that's going to be a big thing starting on Sunday. The glimpses that we had of him in the preseason looked pretty good. All indications from training camp are that he's ready to go. But until you start playing these real games, you're not going to know. You're really and really, not that the old propaganda machine isn't cranking it out like it used to at Ashburn. There's still some of that. There's always going to be positive vibes coming out of there when you're in this situation. Until you've started losing games, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you say? Now, sometimes you can read between the lines as to what players say. You can parse their words and find out what they're saying. But, again, all positive vibes, and it starts with the coach, Dan Quinn, who is about to coach his first game in Washington on Sunday.
Going into training camp, we knew this was going to be a tough camp. We were going to put him in tough spots, work a lot of game management situations, a couple of trips on the road. So we wanted to test the players and put them into difficult spots. We had a lot of competitions that we wanted to go through. So those were the markers, that I was looking for. And then as you get closer to it, now some of the roles start to emerge and how guys can be featured in those specific roles. So when you go from 90 down, now these puzzle pieces all start to come together. And so those were the markers I've seen leading up to it. The road trips, the practices against other teams, our practice against one another, that we just kept improving. And that's usually, what I'm looking for, to see a team that's always, looking to compete and improve.
So he likes what he sees. And another thing we haven't heard from Quinn, I'm just thinking about this. We did hear it from Ron Rivera quite a bit. Rivera took a team to a Super Bowl, as Quinn did, and he lost. And with Rivera's team, they didn't produce. I mean, Denver won that Super Bowl with Peyton Manning literally not being able to throw. He won that with his brain. He really couldn't launch the ball anymore. That's why he had to retire after that Super Bowl. And you would hear, references to Carolina, and he brought all these Carolina people with him. Dan Quinn really hasn't done that. Now, I don't think he wants to talk much about the Super Bowl, blowing the 28-3 lead against Tom Brady and the Patriots. That's a tough thing, especially when your forte is defense, when you're a defensive guy, and that game got away from you. A lot of reasons for it. Kyle Shanahan should have run the ball instead of throwing it late in the game to run some clock. But, okay, they lost that game. But he's been pretty good about that, I think. We'll see what happens as the year goes on. But you're not hearing a lot of Atlanta references there. He's talked about how he learned from Atlanta and how he may have made some mistakes there that he wants to correct. But I give him some credit for that. That he's not referencing Atlanta and the coaches that he brought in. Yeah, some of them will work with him in the past, and some of them have come from Dallas with him and things like that. but it's not really, that kind of a situation with him. Players from other organizations, though, then Bobby Wagner's one of them. He played for Quinn when Quinn was the defensive coordinator in Seattle, and the Seahawks won the championship. He's a guy that, and I've talked about this throughout the preseason. This is an old guy reference. He's since passed away. He went on to a coaching career in various spots, including here after he played. But I've referenced this a number of times, that when George Allen came here in 1971, this is a team that had a winning season under Vince Lombardi in 1969, but by and large through the 60s they were horrendous, and rightfully so, because they didn't start to get black players until 1962. There was a racist ownership in George Preston Marshall. He didn't want to do that, and finally they started to get with the times, and 15 years after Jackie Robinson broke the color line, they got players of color here and started to get better. But it had been a long haul since they had been a good team back in the 1940s with Sammy Baugh. And Allen looked at the team, looked at the offense, where you had future Hall of Famer in Charlie Taylor, a marginal Hall of Famer in Larry Brown. I think he should get some consideration for that. Bobby Mitchell had retired, but Jerry Smith, great tight end, also a guy who probably should get some consideration for the Hall of Fame. He had offensive guys, and he knew he had to beef up the defense, and that's when he made all those trades with the Rams to get his former players, the Ramskins, the over-the-hill gang. And the middle linebacker on that team was Jack Pardee. And Jack Pardee was up there. He was in his upper 30s, and he was only going to play 2 years, wound up being 2 years. But in that first year, he established something that was so important to that defense. They had some players. Chris Hamburger's in the Hall of Fame from that team. Brig Owens was a great player. Pat Fisher. They had some defensive talent, but he was the one that brought it all together, and he was like a coach on the field, and he had players in the right position all the time. I remember the first game, Richie Pettibone intercepted 3 passes from the Cardinals. They had 4 interceptions overall. Excuse me, in that game. Wagner, I think, can have the same kind of effect here. Ron Rivera was a linebacker. He never got the linebacker position right. He took Jamin Davis in the first round. Jamin Davis, the first they tried him at middle linebacker, now an outside linebacker. Now he's going to be a defensive end, essentially, a pass rusher. But Wagner is going to be a Hall of Famer. He's going to go to the Hall of Fame as a linebacker. He's won a Super Bowl with Seattle. He's been in the league a long, long time. He's still only 34 years old, led the league in tackles last year. So when he talks about this team being ready, he could couch it a little bit, but I'm buying what he's selling.
I think it's just the feeling. I think you can feel the energy in the building. You can feel the camaraderie. You can feel, the guys taking the game serious and having fun with it at the same time. And so, what up, champion? So I'm excited to get everybody out there. Preseason we haven't been able to get everybody out there, but it's been cool to have some of those joint practices, and so it's time it's real now, so it's time to go out there.
This is another season opener for you. I'm sure it never gets old. What's so special about kind of that first game of a new season?
Because whatever happened that off season, whether good or bad, you have to sit with, and work out, and you have OTAs, you have to sit through OTAs, you have to sit through preseason, and so there's a lot of stuff built up to this first game, the preparation, the goals that you write down, the dreams that you probably have. And so this is just a start to whatever you drum up this offseason.
Yeah, so I buy it. I think that he would think he'd be the kind of leader that if it wasn't so rosy, he'd kind of let you know. That's I don't know him, but that's just my perception. Here's something else very encouraging. Nick Allegretti, who's we used to have the Hogs here, and they all kind of became media stars at one point. George Stark did a lot of radio and television. Jeff Bostic, I worked with Joe Jacoby for 10 years doing pre- and post-game shows on the other station. Offensive linemen, when things are good, can become stars. Nick Allegretti is a guy you should become familiar with. He's going to be starting opposite of Sam Cosmi at the other guard. He was a backup and did some spot starting, and actually was a starter last year with the Kansas City Chiefs. And I'm interested to hear, what he sees versus where he came from. He just came from a team that's going to try and win its third straight Super Bowl. So this was yesterday, and Allegretti on what he's seen here and why he thinks this has a chance to be a success.
Just the composure and the way we practice every day. Practice hard every single day, and I think the thing that's awesome is the best players practice the hardest. That's something that was the case in my prior team, and that's definitely the case here. Our guys that are expected to do the most are the ones working the hardest, and brings everyone else along with them. So I really like that.
And Allegretti played in the Super Bowl last year with a torn biceps. That's a tough thing to do. You're basically down to one arm. So he's a tough guy, and really, if you've seen any of his news conferences, not that offensive linemen do that many, but when he was introduced, I was really impressed. So look at him as being a media star. We'll get to some more football in just a few minutes. Travis Kelce with a really good conversation with Rich Eisen the other day. There's a basketball story. And I continue to be baffled by the term in the NCAA, recruiting violations. What the hell is it now? In the NIL era, where, as Barry Switzer calls it, now it's legal. What is illegal? What do you do that could possibly be illegal now? It seems crazy. But Penny Hardaway, who could have been a Hall of Fame player in the NBA had he not had a knee injury, which really derailed things. Remember, it looked like the Orlando Magic was poised to win a bunch of championships. They had Shaquille O'Neal, number one, and then the following year they draft Chris Webber, but they traded him for Penny Hardaway. So you had the two big things that you needed, especially at that time: a great big man and a point guard. And it just never materialized. They didn't win it all. They got to the final. They did get to the finals and were swept by the Houston Rockets, but it just didn't happen. So Penny Hardaway has moved on to his alma mater as the coach, Memphis, and there's been a lot of stuff over the years. I'm kind of surprised he's still there, but the latest is that the school has acknowledged the existence of an anonymous letter alleging widespread potential rules violation in the program and said that the letter has been passed on to the NCAA. Okay, that's the school saying that. Off of that, Penny Hardaway announced the firing of 4 members of his staff. The season launches in November. You don't fire 4 members of your staff in September. That doesn't happen unless there's something going on here. The letter alleges Hardaway's personal involvement in what could be major violations. What are major violations now? In the recruitment of a player who came to Memphis and a second prospect who did not enroll at the school. The letter claims those violations occurred in 2020 and 2022. It also alleges academic violations occurred. Academic violations, what are they? Occurred in the 23-24 school year. The allegations in the letter have not been independently sustained. Hardaway's program previously was under investigation for alleged impermissible recruiting of James Wiseman. Yeah, remember that. He played just 3 games for them and then went to the NBA after he got a 12-game suspension. So he's run a program which has been under the microscope for a while. But again, what could you possibly do that would be illegal? They had brought in some players that it didn't work out. They paid him a lot of money to do it as soon as the NIL kicked in. But as we hear these stories about what went on, the Michigan thing, okay, the sign stealing and Connor Stallions, I mean, let's face it, as Rick Neuheisel said the other day, he's giving it the old Gordon Liddy, not to my recollection, thing. So, okay, they were stealing Stein. But in terms of, the grand scheme of things, big deal, really. I mean, let's just make college sports what it is. It's professional sports. You go and get the players you can get. The player decides whether that's a good situation for him, whether it's the most money or the biggest path to the NFL or the NBA, and do it that way. This stuff that keeps floating around in the water, it's just ridiculous. When we find out what these things are, who knows? And the academics, stop. How does a guy graduate? I transferred one time in college. I did. I went from American University to Trinity University, and they took most of my credits. I think there was 1 or 2 that they didn't take. But These guys that jump from school to school to school, are they really keeping up academically? I mean, do they really monitor this anymore? I don't think so. And I bet you there's a lot of hanky-panky going on with that as well. These guys represent the school. They get paid a salary. They make a lot of money for the school with television and these stadiums that seat 100,000 people. Let's call it what it is. And let's stop this hypocrisy about student-athlete, which does not exist anymore. Anyway, 35 years ago today, and it's amazing what a firestorm this created. Jane Pauley had been the co-anchor of the Today Show going back to 1976, and she'd worked with Tom Brokaw, who moved on to become an anchor, and Brokaw was replaced by Brian Gumbel. And Jane Pauley and Brian Gumbel worked together, I don't know how many years, but it was probably close to 10. And everything seemed hunky-dory, the perfect morning combo. And along comes Deborah Norville. Now, Deborah Norville at that time was very young. She had blonde hair. She looked younger than Jane Pauley, who used to wear her hair in like a ponytail. And Deborah Norville wore the hairstyle of the time with a lot of hairspray in it and poofy and things like that. And she had been a quickly rising star. She started out as anchor of NBC News at Sunrise, which was the program that preceded the Today Show. She had very, very good ratings. And they said, okay, we're going to move her to the Today Show as the newsreader, what they call it, the newsreader. But they did something that was kind of unprecedented on these morning shows. She, after reading the news, would take a seat next to Jane Pauley on the couch and chat it up with Brian Gumbel. And one thing led to another, and it was like, oh, boy, you could just like the shark approaching, and she's going to push good old Jane Pauley out of the way. And boy, it didn't take long, because on this day was the day that she got her seat on the couch, and it was less than 2 months later that Jane Pauley left, and here was the awkward departure.
Deborah, 13 years ago, I got a telegram from my predecessor, Barbara Walters. She wished me good luck and a good alarm clock. You are already a veteran of the Dawn Patrol. You already have my respect and my friendship. Here's my alarm clock. Thanks.
Oh, brother.
Sister.
Sister? Waking up is going to be the easy part, but the hard part's going to be following in your footsteps, because they're awfully big shoes to fill. This'll help. Like that time when I got up 30 minutes before sunrise and almost didn't make it in. Lord knows the last few weeks haven't been easy for any of us. When I was asked to join the Today program a couple of months ago as the news anchor, I was thrilled. The chance to be a journalist on this program, I think, is every reporter's dream. And it really was, for me, a dream come true. And to work with both of you on a daily basis and continue to learn from you, as I have the times I've filled in, and to be your friend has meant a great deal to me, and the chance to continue that was unbelievable.
And it was unbelievable, the reaction to this, because the viewers did not like her. They did not like Deborah Norville. And so when she went on maternity leave, she was replaced by a perky young woman who everybody liked by the name of Katie Couric. Now, it ends fine, as Katie had a long run with the Today Show and has done other things. And then you had Deborah Norville, who took over Inside Edition, which she's been doing for like 30 years. And Jane Pauley is still working. She does the Sunday morning show on CBS. But boy, was that a big deal at the time. Oh, it was all, when People magazine was an even bigger deal. This was all, look at this. Look at what's happening here, a cat fight. And people jumped all over it. So Deborah Norville, wrong place, wrong time. And the whole thing did not end well for her in that circumstance, though she was able to keep a long broadcast career going. But boy, that was a huge deal. A couple of food stories to finish up with. One of them is a guy who made a grilled cheese sandwich every day for a year and showed it on Reddit. His name is Pavel Konko. working at a deli in Raleigh, North Carolina, started making grilled cheese sandwiches and posting them on Reddit, devoting a segment to the dish. And he labeled his first post, "Day one of posting grilled cheese sandwiches until I run out of cheese types." He thought it'd go for like 100 days or so. But he said the supporters of Reddit inspired him to keep melting cheese. He said, okay, yeah, cheese is awesome. So he continued to do it, 31 years old, and he got this, he's promoted in his job in Raleigh to the cheese clerk. So he had access to all kinds of cheese and kept the process consistent to make the cheese the only variable. He preferred a single slice cut on the thicker side, which he says gives it a better stretch than the grated product or multiple thin slices. Leaves the cheese out for 30 minutes so he can cut it. It's easier to, cut it when it reaches room temperature. And use the same bread, the Toronto panini style, which he says has a neutral flavor, lets the cheese shine. He pressed each identically in the panini press and took pictures of them at the same angle. So there's day after day after day, people could count on that. Cheese and bread, that's it. And he said when you're putting in other things such as vegetables or meat, you're making a melt, right? He's a purist. And so he put out for his final post, which is the classic grilled cheese that I think we all grew up with, a double layer of Kraft singles, right? He said it cost him about $2,500 to do this. He doesn't know whether he'll do it with anything else. But if you're into that thing, and who doesn't love grilled cheese, there is that. And then there's this story, which had a terrible beginning, but a happy ending. It's a couple of kids, young kids, ages, 10 and 8, Rebecca and Josh Caldwell. They live in Chesapeake, Virginia, and they did what a lot of kids do in the summertime. They opened up a lemonade stand. Isn't that nice? And the mother said, yeah, we've been doing that for years. There have never been any problems. Cost of lemonade has really gone up. They're charging $2 a cup, but okay, little kids making money with a lemonade stand. What's more Americana than that? Well, this is what happens in 2024. As the kids are running the lemonade stand, the mother goes inside says to take a call. I don't think she's answering a landline. She's probably using her cell phone inside. But she goes in for a couple minutes, and a guy drives up, jumps out of his car, and takes the money, takes the jar, which had about $40 in it. Oh, my God. So the mom, Annetta, called the Chesapeake Police Department to report the incident. When the officers arrived, Caldwell, the woman, and her husband had shared footage from their surveillance camera showing the man stealing the money and driving off in a silver Toyota sedan. Well, this is one of those things that local news loves, right? So it's picked up by outlets, and stations started advertising the Saturday lemonade stand, and as word spread, people made plans to show up. And so a guy by the name of Andrew Reyes said, I'm the father of 2 kids, so it resonated with me. I wanted to gather as many people as I could. So he decided to post about the upcoming lemonade stand in his biker group. Bunch of bikers. How about that? Bike, meet up, and ride. One thing in the motorcycle community, you don't mess with kids. Once we saw the story, it had to be done. On August 24th, a group of more than 130 bikers rolled up to the lemonade stand. Over the course of the day, about 650 people showed up, including family, friends, neighbors, strangers, local firefighters, etc. It ran from 10 to 2 a.m. The family and the kids, they pocketed $6,500 from this and donations that were made. They also said that they were going to put it to good use. Their 20-year-old sister has an upcoming missionary trip to Asia, and they want to finance that, and they're going to use the rest to buy a 4-wheeler and a dirt bike. Okay, they earned that. Police did arrest a 19-year-old suspect on August 27th, charged him with theft in connection to the case. There's a lot of different angles to this, but just think about this: that the way this story unfolds, 2 kids have the unthinkable happen. A guy jumps out of the car, steals their lemonade money, but there's a surveillance camera that looks at it. The television stations pick it up. A group of bikers show up. A motorcycle gang shows up to support this. The kids rake in $6,500 when they had lost $40, and the the stupid schmuck who had stolen the $40 driving up in his Toyota to steal the jar, there's a surveillance camera which finds him. So I guess all's well that ends well. If I were the mom, I'd be a little bit concerned that, this happened and somebody else, might do more than just steal the money. But it's a really fascinating story about lemonade stands in the 21st century. The classic one is the kid sitting out there with a pitcher of lemonade and cups and some ice, and they charge 10 cents. Now it's $2 a cup, enough to accumulate enough money so that somebody robs them. Motorcycle gang steps in. It goes viral. They get $6,500. Crazy, 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 crazy. All right, that's a wrap for me. Bram is coming up next, and I'll see you back here tomorrow morning at 9 a.m.